It's a whole new space.
It's a whole new space.
Don't you dare close your eyes.
The whole mic stand might fall down.
I hope not. I really hope not.
Books. Books. Books.
Hello, and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that may or may not. God, I had it and then I lost it immediately.
The podcast that loses all its bits.
Yep, there we go. I am your host, Grace Todd, writer, editor, book gremlin, and with me, as you have already heard, is friend of the pod, William Albritton.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Fantastic. Friend of the pod, man about town, debutante, courtesan on occasion.
Official sponsor of Bride Week.
Official sponsor of Bride Week.
Well, I'm glad to have you back, buddy.
I'm so glad to be here.
And
what didn't I read today?
I will tell you in just a minute, because as you so charmingly misheard when I accidentally said Pride Week instead of Pride Month, it is the beginning of June, which is Pride Month, and also in William's head, Bride Week.
That's right. Bride Month, baby.
We're getting queer and we're getting hitched.
Uh-huh.
Why not?
Everybody's getting gay married.
Everybody's getting gay married. Woo!
Lovely.
We are going to kick off Pride Month with one of my favorite queer authors. But just a little bit of housekeeping first. If you have not already seen it on Instagram, where I have been shouting incessantly, Didn't Read It now has official merch.
Merch, baby.
In part because I need a new computer.
Spend your money. Look like a nerd.
So if you look in the show notes, there is a link to TeePublic. You can get shirts, mugs, stickers, all kinds of stuff. And all of it helps me keep making the show. So there it is. That's my little plug of pleading. My
Buy
plea
something
plug.
or I will marry your spouse.
William's feeling very combative about Bride Week.
Listen, man, Bride Week is every thembo for themselves, man.
And I guess one last little plug. If you haven't, consider leaving a review for the show or telling a friend, because that would be real nice and helpful.
Tell your friends about the show or I will marry them. I got so many rings, dog. They're on quick draw. Oh, awful.
Pew, pew, pew.
Just
Engaged.
throwing diamonds at people.
But they're all vintage, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
No blood diamonds here.
That being done, and you not yet busy planning your nuptials to whomever, what do you know, my friend, about Oscar Wilde?
Oh, boy. I know you did your thesis, dissertation, whatever on him, and I think he was gay, and that's like all I know about him.
Great. Perfect.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty good. He was very gay.
What?
I have given William the official soundproofing walrus to toy with, and now the soundproofing walrus keeps popping up at me from behind the little shield thing that separates our mics.
Yes, very good. Yes.
Grade A jokes for an audio medium.
Yeah. We love prop work on a podcast. Get all of you. You don't get my jokes. You don't deserve them.
All right. So to an extent, Oscar Wilde needs no introduction insofar as he is probably one of the most sort of household name recognizable authors in terms of famous gay writers. There is, I think, some complicating to be done of that legacy and some nuance that has been lost in the sort of, shall we say, Tumblrification of Wilde. But I think we're going to start with this story, which is, as per usual, this is one of his sort of B-sides. It's not as widely sort of read or written about, but I think there's a lot more going on in it than it's given credit for. And it's also nice and short and kind of fun. So we're going to dive in.
I'm so excited.
Are you ready?
I have one more derailment before we talk about this story.
Oh, good.
Which is Have you seen those, speaking of the Tumblrification of famous people, the like little bios of the founding fathers where they're like, it's like Thomas Jefferson with a bunch of bullet points that's like non-binary, gay, met God, she's black.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's one of those for Oscar Wilde, and I'm going to try to find it.
Oh, my God. Amazing.
Miku
All right.
Binder, Oscar Wilde.
This is a drawing of an Oscar Wilde in a sweater vest and jacket with purple underlights in their hair and what appears to be purple eyeshadow. And it says, Oscar Wilde, he, him, Irish flag, pride flag, art/theater kid, Tumblr girly, friends with Joan before she became, quote, popular, good-natured but snobbish. That is actually all very accurate.
Yeah. This one seems more sincere than the other ones. But exactly one person will know what I mean when I say Miku Binder, Oscar Wilde, and to you, I'm sorry.
All right. I have no idea what kind of code you've just slipped into my podcast, but I'll allow it.
You're so welcome. It's nothing. Well, I hope it's nothing, but I actually don't know. But let's talk about a story.
All right. Come with me on a journey through a Sphinx without a secret. One afternoon, I was sitting outside the Café de la Paix, watching the splendor and shabbiness of Parisian life, and wondering over my vermouth at the strange panorama of pride and poverty that was passing before me, when I heard someone call my name. I turned round and saw Lord Murchison. We had not met since we had been at college together, nearly 10 years before, so I was delighted to come across him again, and we shook hands warmly. At Oxford, we had been great friends. I had liked him immensely. He was so handsome, so high-spirited, and so honorable. We used to say of him that he would be the best of fellows if he did not always speak the truth. But I think we really admired him all the more for his frankness. I found him a good deal changed. He looked anxious and puzzled, and seemed to be in doubt about something. I felt it could not be modern skepticism, for Murchison was the stoutest of Tories. So I concluded that it was a woman, and asked him if he was married yet. So, our narrator is in Paris. He's run into an old Oxford friend who we are being told in a sideways Oscar Wilde way is not quite a himbo, but, you know, very, very frank, tends to just say what he's thinking, very traditional, right? The stoutest of Tories. It says elsewhere that he believes firmly in, like, the family.
I stand Frank Murchison, except that he's a piece of conservative. Great. Fantastic. What a tapestry we've been given.
And when our narrator asks Gerald Murchison about his he's like, are you, immediately, of course, if Gerald is perplexed, it must be a woman, because nothing else could possibly perplex Gerald.
Mm-hmm. He knows everything.
And Gerald says, I don't understand women well enough.
That's so clear.
And our narrator says, my dear Gerald, women are meant to be loved, not understood.
Okay.
Which is one of those Oscar Wilde quotes that you see splashed all over so many. Mm-hmm. Anyway. And Gerald responds that he cannot love where he cannot trust. And our narrator senses that there is a mystery afoot. Mm. He literally says, I believe you have a mystery in your life, Gerald. Tell me all about it. And they leave the cafe and they go to get into a carriage. But the first carriage they encounter is yellow. And Gerald says, absolutely not. Anything but a yellow carriage. And they get into a green one instead. They go down the boulevard, they go to a restaurant to have dinner, and once they are seated at dinner, Gerald pulls out a portrait of a woman, which is described as tall and slight, and strangely picturesque with her large, vague eyes and loosened hair. She looked like a clairvoyant, and was wrapped in rich furs. And Gerald says, what do you think of that face? Is it truthful?
Ew. Are we doing phrenology on portraits of women now?
I don't know. I'll let you decide. Maybe a little bit.
The angle of the mandible there really just, that tells you she's not faithful, you know?
She's got a liar's nose.
She's got a liar's nose. Oh,
There's
boy.
deceit in the dimple of her chin.
Somebody call... Who's the phrenology guy? Is that Mike Cernovich?
Oh, there are so many phrenology guys that I couldn't actually tell you.
True. Oh, man. I'm lost on whether the color of the carriage means anything.
We'll discuss it later. I'm just making sure I throw in again, this is a very short little story, so all the details matter.
Okay.
And our narrator gives the portrait a good look over, and he says, "It seemed to me the face of someone who had a secret, but whether that secret was good or evil, I could not say. Its beauty was a beauty molded out of many mysteries, the beauty, in fact, which is psychological, not plastic. And the faint smile that just played across the lips was far too subtle to be really sweet."
This is like when people describe the Mona Lisa.
Basically, yeah, that is very much what we're being given here. And Gerald demands to think, to know what he thinks. And he basically says, he sort of hedges and says, "Tell me everything." And Gerald, in good manly fashion, is like, "We'll talk after dinner." And so finally, they finish their meal. And this is Gerald's story, or some of Gerald's story. He says that he was walking down Bond Street, and he passed a little yellow carriage with a woman in it, and he was immediately bewitched by her eyes, by her face. According to him, he spends the next 2 days obsessing over it. He needs to know who is this woman? And he says, he's beginning to conclude that she was just a dream when he finally runs into her at a dinner. And she's introduced as Lady Alroy. And it says, "She came in very slowly, looking like a moonbeam in gray lace, and to my intense delight, I was asked to take her to dinner. After we had sat down, I remarked, quite innocently, 'I think I caught sight of you in Bond Street some time ago, Lady Alroy.' She grew very pale, and said to me in a low voice, 'Pray, do not talk so loud. You may be overheard.'"
She says, "The f*** you did, boy. You didn't see sh*."
And he's very embarrassed and fumbles and then starts talking to her about French plays.
I love this class of people where your go-to, I misspoke and I gotta save it. It's just like, have you seen this play? Man, that shit was crazy.
And the long and short of it is that he falls desperately in love with her. And she's always got this air of seeming like she's worried that someone is listening in on her conversations.
Men love a problem to be solved, a mystery to be unraveled, something for them to latch onto.
My God, yes, they do.
Boy howdy. Frank's in for it.
You mean Gerald?
I'm going to call him Frank for the entire cast because they described his intense frankness, which means he's got to be Frank.
Okay, Frank Gerald.
Frank Gerald.
Ferald.
Nope.
He's going Ferald.
He's feraled for the mysterious French women.
So the first thing that happens is he asks if he can come see her. She says yes, and then he goes to see, she appoints a time. He goes to see her. She's not there. He's
Gerald at the mouth.
And he leaves her Jesus Christ. Then he leaves her a note, and her note in response is like, "You can't write to me you can't write to me at this address anymore. There's a library, you have to leave, if you want to correspond with me, you have to leave my notes in the care of this other place, and then I will get them, and then you can come." And there's all these extra steps to everything, right?
I have this feeling that I'm going to end up being disappointed by the source of the secrecy. And I'm trying to think of what the coolest option is for why she has to, hide all of this. And I think it's that she's a ghost.
Ooh.
Which is the coolest thing I can think of.
And honestly, for a Victorian-era story, that would be dead on, yeah.
Right.
Would not be a surprise. I'm going to pause here for a second and give us both the briefest of intermissions.
All right, audience, quick while she's gone. Tell me all your deepest secrets so I can share them with a mysterious Victorian woman. Oop, I was wrong about something, and she tried to tell me so, and now the evidence is laid bare. I was wrong. All right, the podcast owner is back. Everybody, duck.
Were you talking this whole time?
Maybe. You left me alone with your audience. I had to chat with them to keep them occupied.
What did she say?
Nothing. Don't worry about it.
All right, keep your secrets.
You'll hear it in post by a lovely Victorian ghost woman.
You'll hear it in post.
You'll hear it in post.
All right, so...
all those silly Post Malone portmanteaus.
What?
A nice bearded white rapper, but he's strangely ethereal. That's Ghost Malone.
I see.
Or a lovely Austin Post, but he's thickly rinded red fruit. That's Post Water Malone. There's so many. So you'll hear it in Post Malone.
Okay, fair. If he's crispy on both sides, is he Toast Malone?
Uh-huh.
Good. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So despite all of this nonsense secrecy, they spend the season seeing quite a bit of each other. And he says, finally, sometimes I thought she was in the power of some man, but she looked so unapproachable that I could not believe it. It was really very difficult for me to come to any conclusion, for she was like one of those strange crystals that one sees in museums, which are at one moment clear and at another clouded. At last, I determined to ask her to be my wife. I was sick and tired of the incessant secrecy that she imposed on all my visits, and on the few letters I sent her. I wrote to her at the library to ask her if she could see me the following Monday at 6. She answered yes, and I was in the seventh heaven of delight. I was infatuated with her. In spite of the mystery, I thought then. In consequence of it, I see now. No, it was the woman herself I loved. The mystery troubled me, maddened me. Why did chance put me in its track? So Monday comes, and he's going to go propose, right?
I cannot stop thinking of the dumbest jokes. It's the handshake meme. One side is getting put in a famous rapper's track, and the other side is this guy, and it's why did chance put me in his track?
You know, at least when you're making incredibly stupid jokes, I know that you're actually hearing the story, so that's good.
True. Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm present.
You're engaging.
Also, what a leap from 2 sentences ago to I'm gonna marry this lady.
Yeah, no, he is. And in fairness, months are supposed to have passed, but like,
right.
Yeah, no, he is intoxicated and also infuriated.
I feel like they just like they like flit through like a year's worth of engagements and trysts and whatever. But yeah. Ooh, mysterious woman. I'm gonna marry her.
So they've set an appointment, right? On Monday, he is going to go and he is going to propose and they're going to get married and everything's going to be great. And on Monday, before their appointment, he's having lunch with his uncle and he sees her out in the street, wearing like a thick veil and walking very fast and like looking over her shoulder to see if anyone is following her. And he follows her because he's,
a creep.
I mean, yeah, and also I think if we're going to be even a little bit sympathetic, he's very frustrated, right? There's been all of this secrecy, but also they've gotten to the point where he wants to propose, and he's like, "What is going on? What is your deal?" And he follows her through Paris, and she's, kind of going down these side streets, and she finally goes down this slightly shabby street to a house, and she lets herself in. But it's not her house. And on her way in, she drops her handkerchief.
And he goes to pick it up, and it's not there.
Well,
because she's a ghost.
So he picks it up, and he puts it in his pocket. He temporarily concludes that he had no right to spy on her. But then he actually does go to see her, right? And again, he is planning on proposing.
Oh, but he doesn't, go in the house to follow her?
No.
Oh.
No, he picks up the handkerchief and goes back to his club.
Okay, so he comes to the right conclusion, which is I shouldn't be following this woman into strange houses.
Uh-huh.
Good for you, buddy. You made a good choice.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
One good choice.
When he goes to meet with her, and this is, I think this is what kind of pushes him over the edge, right? He goes in to see her. She looks very beautiful. She's wearing a silver tea gown. She's reclining on a sofa. And she says, "I'm so glad to see you. I haven't been out all day."
Mm.
And he's like,
"You lie."
Yeah, you have. You dropped this in Connor Street.
Mm-hmm. And she vanishes.
And then they have this back and forth. She looked at me in terror, but made no attempt to take the handkerchief. "What were you doing there?" I asked. What right have you to question me? She answered. The right of a man who loves you, I replied. I came here to ask you to be my wife. She hid her face in her hands and burst into floods of tears. You must tell me, I continued. She stood up and, looking me straight in the face, said, Lord Murchison, there's nothing to tell you. You went to meet someone, I cried. This is your mystery. She grew dreadfully white and said, I went to meet no one.
Who was no one?
So they keep going back and forth, and she basically keeps saying, I didn't go to meet anybody. There's no larger mystery to tell. And he gets more and more upset and says some terrible things. We don't know the terrible things. He does the thing where he goes, I said some terrible things. Mm-hmm. And then he storms off, and they never see each other again. He leaves the country for a while. He comes back. She's died of a chill she caught at the fever. A chill she caught at the fever. A chill she caught at the opera.
The fever sounds like the name of a rave event.
It does. Well, she caught a chill at the fever, the rave.
Just shuffling her little booty off.
In her silver tea gown. And then she died.
That would be so hard.
And of course, once she has died, raving in like a formal gown. Yeah. That would be a lot. So many layers. Yeah. You'd be so sweaty.
Yeah.
She's dead. It'd look really cool,
it
though.
It would look really cool.
I want to...
Well, honestly, shuffling, you don't really move a whole lot, so I feel like it would just be the dress, like, kind of poofing up and down a little bit, but, like, your upper body doesn't move at all, like a duck under the water.
That's true. That's fair. All right.
She did. She got a chill at the rave.
Yeah. And, of course, in true dude fashion, now that she's dead, he's like, I loved her so much.
Shut up, brother. Go back to Vienna.
I loved her so madly. And this is where our narrator steps back in. And our narrator asks if he went to the house, the secret house that he'd seen her going into. And he did, of course, because now he's a little obsessed with her. And he says, I could not help it. I was tortured with doubt. I knocked at the door, and a respectable-looking woman opened it. I asked her if she had any rooms to let. Well, sir, she replied, the drawing rooms are supposed to be let, but I have not seen the lady for 3 months, and as rent is owing on them, you can have them. And he shows her a photograph of the woman, and she confirms that that is who had been renting the rooms, and he's like, she's dead.
So she's just independently wealthy and...
Oh, hey, and she says, oh, sir, I hope not, said the woman. She was my best lodger. She paid me 3 guineas a week merely to sit in my drawing rooms now and then.
Oh, wait. Okay, maybe I'm confused. She didn't own the place.
So he's talking to the landlady.
Yes.
Yeah, she was just renting some of the rooms.
Oh. When I hear a woman answer the door and say the lady, I assume like...
Yes, no, not the lady of the house. This woman's a landlord.
Okay.
And Lady Alroy, I keep trying to call her Lady Audley, which is a different. Lady Alroy was renting the rooms in her, like basically renting like a furnished apartment, essentially.
I understand.
And Gerald asks essentially who she was meeting in those rented rooms. The landlady says that she never had any guests. And Gerald says, well, then what did she do here? And she says, she simply sat in the drawing room, sir, reading books, and sometimes she had tea. And Gerald, turning back to our narrator, says, now what do you think it all meant? You don't believe the woman was telling the truth.
Okay, all right. It's the world's first shaggy dog joke.
Hang on. And she says, our narrator says, I do. Gerald says, then why did Lady Alroy go there? My dear Gerald, I answered, Lady Alroy was simply a woman with a mania for mystery. She took these rooms for the pleasure of going there with her veil down and imagining she was a heroine. She had a passion for secrecy, but she herself was merely a sphinx without a secret. Do you really think so? I am sure of it, I replied. He took out the morocco case, opened it, and looked at her photograph. I wonder, he said at last. The end.
All right, f*** you, Frank.
You mean Gerald?
No, I mean Frank.
That's right. All right, so.
One of these days, I'm going to actually confuse a listener by inventing my own narrative of a story, and they're going to follow mine instead of yours.
Oh, no.
So if you're out there, I'm sorry. No, it's cute. I like that story. It's I'm telling you, it's probably not the world's first, but it's the earliest example I've heard of a just a nice long shaggy dog joke.
I think it is and isn't a shaggy dog joke. I think one of the reasons that it doesn't get talked about as much as his other work is because the surface level reading of the story is a kind of misogynistic shaggy dog story, right? It's just like, well...
That's as deep as I am right now.
Yeah. But I think one of the... I was talking earlier about the kind of Tumblrification of Wilde. I think people... I don't know. I think fundamentally people act as if he was this sort of unapologetic queen who ultimately suffered for it. But he was not. Because he couldn't be, right? That was not an option available to you as a Victorian man at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
I believe you.
The moral of the story is just that he's what?
He wrote the picture of Dorian Gray.
Yes.
Yeah. I know who Oscar Wilde is.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do. He was kind of cute.
Oh yeah. Very much so.
He's got the lacrosse player flow.
I've never heard it referred to that way, but yeah. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
That's a Chadley right there.
Yeah, God,
that's a Baxter.
He was a pretty man.
He was a pretty man.
But because his public persona was sort of flamboyant and fashionable and preoccupied, he was very prominent in the social scene. He was clever, he was witty, he was a lot of things that we kind of associate now with being like a flamboyantly out gay man.
Mm-hmm.
But his sexuality was a journey, I think, like it is for most people. And he didn't, by his own accounting, he didn't have his first real gay affair until he was already a married man with 2 children.
Mm. And
his sexuality seems to have been, like I said, like kind of a journey for him. And I think it is for a lot of people, right? I think there are very few people who just wake up at a certain, when they hit puberty and are like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I've decided.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out.
Mm-hmm. Famously, that's how that works.
And so because of that, right, because of what was necessitated by living in a deeply, violently, legally homophobic society, and because of his own evolving understanding of his own sexuality, he was very, very preoccupied in a lot of his work with the idea of people leading double lives and of the opportunities presented by living a double life, and also the dangers, right?
I'm rereading the story in my head with new context, and I like it.
He was very preoccupied with the idea of what the consequences and opportunities are when you withhold parts of yourself, not just from society, but even from the people who are closest to you. And one of the other big things about living in London high society, or even Paris high society, where the story is set, is that society itself necessitates living a double life of a sort, even if you are everything that they want you to be, right? You cannot function in a rules and etiquette obsessed society like that and not ever conceal important parts of who you are or how you feel or even what you're doing, right? Just out of pure manners. You have to pretend. You have to do a lot of pretending. And I think we probably still do. I mean, who among us can say that we're not leading a little bit of a double life sometimes?
Yeah.
When was the last time you lied about your plans or whereabouts in order to not hurt somebody's feelings?
Yesterday?
Yeah. When was the last time you maybe fudged your details, whereabouts, or other elements of yourself in order to make yourself seem a little bit more interesting than you actually felt in that moment?
Yesterday. Every day of my life, baby.
Yeah.
We love a little nebula in our day-to-day.
And then, one of the things that really gets me about this story is we're only learning about her secondhand, right? Like, we're only hearing about her because of the conversation that is happening about her between two men who are giving her no credit. The idea that what she's doing is absurd and has no underpinning at all is based on an assumption that there's nothing she could possibly want to hide from. But again, she's a woman living in Victorian society. She might very well just go to this place to read books and have tea because it means there's no one there to ask her any questions. Or to visit, keeping in mind that high society of this time especially is founded on this kind of never-ending cycle of visits where people come by and they present their card and then you're supposed to have them in and you're supposed to chat with them and you're supposed to be, you're supposed to receive visitors and blah, 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 blah. Are you ever really happy that we don't just drop in on each other unannounced anymore as like a standard society move?
No, but it's because we don't live in a place or have the infrastructural capability to do that ever, really.
That's true. That's a bummer.
I would like to get annoyed of that.
Yeah, actually.
I'd love for that to happen enough that I get annoyed at visitors.
Good point. Made me sad.
So, no, I don't get annoyed at that. But there's a so now that you've brought up Oscar Wilde's double life, and there's an extra meaning that I'm stuck on, which is enforcing the mundanity of having two lives. Like the punchline being, there's nothing else, brother. There's no big secret. She's just reading books. Is like, yeah, I'm a gay dude living my second life. So what?
I think that is a very fair reading, which is, I think it's both like, yeah, this is my double life. It's not as exciting as you want to make it out to be. And I think one of the things that it's kind of doing is it's making fun of society itself. Like this thing that happens all the time. We're seeing it now with the trans panic. It happened a lot during the Victorian era with queerness of all kinds. There's this weird thing in deeply conservative, repressive societies that's like, don't do any of that queer shit, that's bad, but is also like obsessed with ferreting out the queer shit. Right?
Don't do any of this shit, but I really want to know if you do.
Yeah, and it's... right? Like one of the things with this is like, just leave it alone. You saw her in the street. You didn't have to follow her around.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to become obsessed with this mystery.
Mm-hmm.
You could have just let it go.
There are people who exist. Mostly, I'm looking at this from an American lens, but there are people who exist in like religious communities. The concept I'm getting to is just beards, but like they're successful and both of them are happy and satisfied with their situation. And I kind of like, I don't know, what help me connect the dots here, please.
Well, wait, I think you're saying that he could have just let it be and they would have both been happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you don't actually need to know every single secret.
Right. Like, come on, Frank.
Sometimes you're just happier if you don't.
Uh-huh. And, maybe you come to find out the secret but it's like and it's fine.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that this is saying kind of quietly, and what I was getting at with the idea of don't you dare do that, but also being obsessed with hunting it down, is that the concern is not with what you're doing, right? The concern is surveillance. Mm-hmm. The preoccupation is with the absolute unchallenged right to surveil and control everyone's behavior. The behavior itself is not really what's...
Right.
The behavior itself is not the problem.
Right.
Because it can be anything. It's just about being in control.
Mm-hmm. We don't care what you're doing, but we need to know what it is you're doing.
Yes. We need to know every detail. It's very important. And if you try and stop us, we will punish you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, right? Is Gerald...
Who? You mean Frank?
Gerald didn't have to lash out at her. If he was as in love with her as he said he was, when she said, "There's nothing to tell you," he could have said, "Tell me more." And she never got the chance to be like, "No, I literally just go there to read books and drink tea."
Mm-hmm.
And if he'd wanted to know, he probably could have.
Yeah, if he was normal about it.
Gerald be normal challenge. Level impossible.
Level Victorian era.
Level Victorian era. Be normal challenge. Level Victorian era.
That's a tough one.
But
that's this is completely anecdotal now at this point, but that's something that I feel like I'm good at. Like if someone wants to keep a secret and they're like, I don't want to tell you, I'm like, all right, cool.
Great.
Sounds good.
I would have forgotten it anyway.
I'm not going to worry about it. That's none of my business.
People really struggle with that's none of my business.
Yeah.
They really struggle with that's none of my business, and they really struggle with shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both of those things are hard to do.
Yeah. It's the good version of don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask your friends for their secrets. Don't tell cops anything.
Woo! You saved that one, but boy, that was that was walking the tightrope.
Oh, that was the joke all along. I had it planned. I knew what I was doing.
Amazing.
I'm a professional.
Crafted.
Yeah.
Well done.
We're gonna put out that'll be the next round of t-shirts.
Mm-hmm. The front says don't ask, don't tell, and then only when you're behind the person can you see the back that says don't ask any questions, don't talk to the cops. Amazing. That won't get anybody in trouble.
No, never.
Nope.
But there's
they could be camo shirts. Oh, that's good.
Beautiful.
I love it.
You're a fashion genius.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's one final interpretation. I mean, obviously, look, it's a short story. You could spin it in any number of directions.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one last possibility that I'd like to introduce for an interpretation of what's happening with Lady Audley and her secrets.
Are we going to talk about the way that the adjectives in the short story lean into her being a ghost?
We can, if you want. She's a ghost who died again.
Uh-huh.
She had a brief shot at life, and then she died a second time.
Yeah, ghosts can die. That was her condition for staying in our world. She just needed a man to trust her, and it didn't work out. So now she's straight to hell.
Okay.
Good job, Frank.
So here's the thing. Remember I was making a real point about the colors at play?
Uh-huh.
So yellow was a color attributed to the decadent movement and the aesthetic movement, which is the people who were doing all kinds of racy things. Listeners will remember we talked about this a little bit in the Fairy Tales for the Disillusioned episode, where we talked about, among other things, a French lesbian author who was writing fairy tale retellings around this time, who was associated with the decadent movement, which is largely symbolized with yellow. Lady A's carriage is yellow. Okay? That's point one.
Mm-hmm.
Point two. At this time, in Paris, and then it spreads to England, green is a color specifically affiliated with homosexuality. Very pointedly. Young gay men in Paris were wearing, green cravats for a while to signal to each other, and then they all switched to wearing dyed green carnations because they were very tickled by the artificiality of the dyed carnation.
Cute.
These are the kind of things that are happening in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So Lady A's carriage is yellow, and when Gerald and the narrator get together, and Gerald's like, I will not get in a yellow carriage, his friend is like, no worries. Then they hop together in a green one.
Okay.
And our narrator, Gerald's buddy, and Gerald, as we've discussed, is pretty naive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our narrator is, shall we say, suspiciously fashionable.
Mm-hmm. And just head over heels in love with Frank.
And they were very good friends at Oxford.
Yeah. Yep.
And that scene is a little bit the equivalent of I am so sorry about your woman problems, buddy. Let's climb into my rainbow painted Subaru and talk it out.
Mm-hmm. Hey, man, look, I got the stage production of Cats on tape back at home. If you want to have a couple wine coolers and, relax a little.
The narrator is the one who's like, yeah, her double life was probably nothing. Definitely don't worry about it. She was just a woman with a mania for secrets.
We've descended another level.
Uh-huh.
My new reading of this is not only is the punchline, the double life is mundane and doesn't matter. The first life is the double life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's just as feasible that she was meeting other women in these rooms and that our narrator knows it
Mm-hmm.
because this is Paris.
You have such a way of leading me to these things to get me to figure it out. And part of it is I'm okay at media analysis. But you really just, you sow the seeds for me, and I walk along like a little chicken, picking them all up. I'm your trained fowl.
So, it's thoroughly possible that our narrator and Lady A were running in the same circles in the Parisian underground, and Gerald just wandered a little too close to something he was not ready to understand.
Oh, Icarus. You fool.
And he proved himself to be unsuited to the world that he was tiptoeing right up to by throwing basically a little patriarchal temper tantrum.
Oh, your wax carriage will melt. And you will fall.
And I'm not saying that's the interpretation, but it's an interpretation, and it's one that's certainly supported by the text.
Yeah, I like that. I can't tell if I'm confusing myself or if there's something there, but what you're saying is, from the woman's point of view, this dude is like her second life, or maybe, right? Is that kind of...
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that could be argued is that whatever she had going on, that Gerald was the fake life,
mm-hmm.
and that whoever she was meeting mm-hmm. in those rooms, could have been man, could have been women,
mm-hmm.
especially with the yellow carriage, you know. Well, and I think, here's what I will say. One of the things about a double life is, how do you really determine which one is the true life?
No, exactly.
Which one is real?
From the societal point of view, it's whichever one is the most normative, but that's not what it feels like to the person.
Yeah. Maybe even if she was just reading books, maybe she just felt like her most valid self when she was alone, where no one knew where she was,
mm-hmm.
reading books and drinking tea,
mm-hmm.
not having to think about who she was or who was looking at her or what the servants were gossiping about, whatever.
Penelope Bridgerton had ass.
And yeah, I mean, when you are in the closet, especially by force, who is the real you? Well, and also, even if you are not in the closet by force, as you grow and as you change, and maybe you learn new things about your sexuality or you learn new things about your gender, well, then was the old you which life was real? And it's all real. That's all you. That's all who you are. And the trouble comes when people can't accept that, or when you're forced to engage in risky subterfuge to keep yourself sane or safe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I should tell my wife about my boyfriend.
They'd probably really get along.
Probably, yeah. Takes a real certain kind of person to enjoy me,
Yeah.
We'll get along.
I would like to say, though, that this episode does not apply to any of the straight women who have been writing essays about their marriages in The Cut.
What's The Cut?
The Cut, it's one of those publications. It's constantly publishing those essays that wind up being the main character of the day, because it's like the woman who put her life savings in a shoebox and then gave it to a scammer. You didn't...
Huh?
Oh, my God. All right, I'm going to have to cut that, and also I have some essays to forward you from The Cut.
Nah, dude, don't cut that. Are you kidding me?
Good morning, except to everyone except for trad wives.
Straight people writing essays about their marriages is such a cursed field.
It's bad. It's very concerning.
Oh, man. And only second to the people who either make video media or essays about their homesteading life. You do the barest amount of research, and it's like, oh, this person's dad is an executive vice president at Lockheed Martin.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Right.
There's a guy I follow. It's Sylvan Aqua Farms, who is great. He's fantastic. The content he's making is great. And a lot of his content is just like, yeah, this is homesteading influencers are all trying to scam you into losing your life savings for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's delightful.
They're selling you a lie for money.
But,
your presence on their content drives ad revenue.
And, genuinely speaking of influencers, and this is the last thing I wanted to say, is like, if we loop all the way back around to kind of taking this story at surface level, if we just go back to like, she's a woman who read too many novels and wanted to feel like the main character of a novel. And so she was doing all of this pomp and circumstance to make herself feel mysterious and romantic and interesting.
Still cool.
A of all, still cool. B of all, the idea of living your life as a performance for an imagined viewer is something that I find uncomfortably resonant.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because so many of us are living our lives for unimagined and also literal viewers because we're videoing it and putting it on the internet.
Yeah. Ooh, there's a fun essay there about social media as a stand-in for societal pressures, but like as a real entity, like some sort of AI or like an actual person. There's something there that there's a lot of dots to connect.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely could position social media as like a literal physical embodiment of the kind of gossip and damage that, you know, the gossip and the damage done by the gossip when you're talking about high society in the Victorian era and even before. I mean, that I think one of the reasons that people resonate so much with Bridgerton right now is because all of the constant, the big concern at the heart of Bridgerton, right, is like, I must keep my reputation intact so I can secure a good marriage, which I think people find very sympathetic right now, because it's, I think if you are trying to make a career as a person on the internet, especially if you're trying to be like an influencer, which is really one of the only ways you can get rich now if you don't start that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
oh boy.
Granted, most of them are rich already, but it's the same thing, right? It's like you must protect your reputation at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can continue to make the brands happy.
Mm-hmm. That'd be a fun...
So you can make a prosperous marriage with Target's sponsored content.
Oh my... Dude, oh my god, I can see it now. So this is an original thought to me, but I'm so glad that I have never seen like a heavily sponsored marriage. You know, like I got my blank from blank, and I have not seen that. Please don't tell me that they're common, because I'm gonna cry. But oh my god, I'm so glad I am not shoved that content.
Yeah. Ugh.
Like saying I got my dress from this shop, it's great, is one thing, but like I haven't seen like a corporate sponsored marriage, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
Please
I mean,
don't tell me they exist.
I think when you live in a society that is...
We live in a society.
I mean, we don't. Not really. Not in any of the ways that make a society worth having. Anyway, when you live in a society that is fundamentally underpinned by both fame and surveillance on the two ends of the spectrum, you wind up living a lot of your life for the unseen lens, and now we are manifesting that lens and making it literal. And as a result, this story really speaks to me on a bunch of different levels. And I'm bummed that it's so often overlooked. So yeah. Oh. What do you think? Where have you landed on Lady A?
I try not to. When possible. Not a big fan of Lady Alroy. She's much better than Lady Partial Roy. And
it's terrible.
You know,
that was awful.
I think
you're fired.
Ghosts are allowed to have a little mystery.
Yeah. Allow your friends and loved ones to cultivate an air of mystery this Pride Month.
Mm-hmm. Especially if they're apparitions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, cultivate an air of mystery this Pride Month, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's get mysterious with it.
Absolutely. And force the people around you to respect it.
Yeah. All right, let's bring her home.
Host, thank you so much for taking me on this journey. That was a lot of fun.
Guest, thank you so much for joining me. Happy Pride Month. I would like to, I'm sorry, I have to do this. This is very craven. But I'd like to remind everyone that we do have t-shirts, tote bags, mugs.
Merch.
In the show notes.
We have merch.
It just helps me defray the expenses of keeping the show going.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them says metatextual.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Mm.
Happy Pride.
Mm-hmm. What? You know what? All right. Sure. Sure, man.
It's a joke Lee made in like our first episode. I used the word metatextual, and she was like, am I metatextual?
Well, you can find me on TikTok at Bernie's Hog. I only post lifting content. I hope you enjoy. Otherwise, please don't find me.
Okay, there we go. You can find William on TikTok at Bernie's Hog.
Mm-hmm. As in Senator Bernard Sanders' massive dong.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie's Hog.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good at picking up very heavy things and putting them back down again.
Mildly heavy.
It's very impressive.
Thanks.
And you can find us in all the usual social media places. We always appreciate reviews and whatnot. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. I had a blast. Happy Pride. Go be your queer selves. I'm going to go be my queer self. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author, because they could sure use the love. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. See ya.
Didn't Read It was created, written, recorded, and edited by me, Grace Todd. You can follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at Didn't Read It.
Our theme song is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton.
For sources cited and a full list of episodes, you can visit us at didntreaditpod.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review. It makes a big difference, and we appreciate it immensely.
If you did not enjoy the show, we are accepting applications for a full-time nemesis at didntreaditpod@gmail.com. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia, and to Pesca Trio Publishing.